The real estate market is a $370 trillion market. And it did not become that big because everyone wants to clean toilets, fix the roof, and care for the garden for a living. It did become so big because our fiat monetary system, the US dollar, the yen, the euro, whatever shitcoin you're using, is broken. So people naturally try to find a safe way to keep up with inflation. The problem is most houses do not even keep up with inflation, and it gives you a 30-year mortgage bondage. It's not an asset that gives you more sovereignty. In many ways, it's an asset that gives you less sovereignty. What do you think will happen once the monetary system is no longer broken and there is a nice alternative, sound money? The money will not flow from the fiat money to real estate, but it will now flow from real estate to Bitcoin, to sound money. And with our guest today, Tom, we will talk about this and also about how Bitcoin will make housing not only more affordable, but even more beautiful. Enjoy. It's really an interesting time that we are currently living in. There's a lot of things going on in the world, but also in Bitcoin specifically. And everyone currently outside of Bitcoin is asking me how I'm doing because Bitcoin is down like 50%. And all of those questions are coming from the normies. How do you feel currently in Bitcoin, and what do you kind of see in the market?
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, I don't usually talk about price, but just because that 2 Fridays ago, I guess I got the most text messages I ever received from people just asking me the same thing. Are you okay? Is Bitcoin okay? And I just really kind of laughed it off. Like, I've been in this long enough that I'm like, the thesis has not changed. Nothing has changed. This is a volatile asset. This is a mirror to what fiat is doing. It's not really anything indicative of what Bitcoin is or is not. So, but I do have some clients who are, they've become fearful. They got into Bitcoin, maybe didn't research it as much as maybe you and I have, and they're fearful right now. So it reminds me of when we went down to 16K after the FTX collapse. It kind of reminds me of that time, maybe even a little bit more, to be honest. I've been dealing with quite a few people who are fearful, and then others who are fine. They might not be accumulating more. And then some who are like, screw it, I'm able to buy more. I'm buying more. But definitely fear out there for sure. But my take is nothing has changed in Bitcoin. I own it for all the exact same reasons. I'm sure you're the same.
Yeah, and I think in the bear market, it's so nice to see who studied Bitcoin and who understands it, and who was just in because it was a trendy thing to do. Like Bitcoin over 100K, it goes to 126K. Oh yeah, I want to have some Bitcoin. And then they panic on the downside because they actually don't have understanding and a trust into Bitcoin itself. They only had the trust and understanding of the Bitcoin price.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're my age, so I'm 53, if you're like in between the ages of 50 and let's say 65, and you got into Bitcoin and you put a sizable amount of your net worth over time into Bitcoin, and I know some of people in this age category who did. So this is like leading edge of Gen X, younger baby boomers, like that kind of time frame, that kind of generation. And they're used to real estate, a lot of our clients. And real estate is very kind of steady. It goes up. It has had crashes in the 1990s in Canada. It definitely had a major 6-year correction. And now in Canada, for the last, I would call it 2-3 years, it's been soft for sure. But all those other years in between 1990 and today, if that's their time that they kind of grew into adulthood, real estate was just very like steady. Right? So they're not used to Bitcoin. They don't have something to compare Bitcoin to. They're not used to something that goes up to, in US dollars, as something 126 and comes down. And they are very used to looking at price as an indicator to the quality of the asset. Right? And with Bitcoin, to me, the characteristics of it are so much more. To me, it's the most saleable good across space, time, and scales. It represents a new form of digital money. It is a global, permissionless, secure thing. And they don't have anything to compare it to. So when it changes in fiat dollar price, they panic. And that's kind of where we are now.
That's such an interesting point. I've never looked at it that way, because if a real estate property is higher priced, generally speaking, it has some something superior over something that is lower priced, like better area, more square meters, like whatever the thing is, the price actually tells you something about the real estate. If you buy a property for 500,000, it will be a different one than it's if it's like $1 million or $2 million property. Bitcoin doesn't really change that much if it's 50,000 or 250,000 or even $1 million. I mean, there are some fundamentals that change, like more people own it, and there's of course like probably more nodes, and there is maybe the base layer a little bit more congested and all of that, but fundamentally it doesn't change, which was a really interesting point. I've never looked at it that way.
Yeah, and especially if you consider their framework being, I'm buying quality real estate. So if you take something like Michael Saylor's example, where he talks about like real estate in Manhattan next to Central Park, or Miami Beach real estate, or in Toronto, it would be some of the higher end neighborhoods. That's considered quality real estate, and quality real estate doesn't tend to fluctuate in dollar price. So then if you're explaining to them that Bitcoin is a quality digital asset, they can't comprehend why it would fluctuate in dollar price, because the quality thing they're used to comparing it against, real estate, doesn't fluctuate so wildly. So to them, it completely freaks them out, right? Even if they're buying rental properties and the income is steady, the price in the real estate could change, but then the rental income tends to stay fairly steady. Even when real estate in the Canadian area anyway, the prices soften a little bit, rents don't tend to soften too much. They tend to stay pretty steady. They might soften a little bit, but typically not as much as a price softening. So if the price softened in real estate, their rents stay steady if they're investors. So then they're like, okay, nothing is really changed. I'm not selling right now. My income on the property is still generally the same. I'm good. But with Bitcoin, because there's no income component to it, and it's just a fiat dollar price, when the price changes, that's the only thing they're measuring against if they don't have a really deep understanding of the architecture and why they're buying it. So they just completely panic. And it's fair. Like, I can see their perspective. I get it. But that's the situation for that generation, people like maybe in my age or above, or maybe even younger people as well. But that's longtime real estate investors. They struggle with, like, what am I buying here? So then you have to talk to them about sovereignty and a global network that's emerging that's not tied to the existing system. You're like, holy smokes, I got to go through a dozen hours of like education here. And, you bring out Jeff Booth's thesis, and we're talking about the price of tomorrow and deflation and the natural state of the free market. And they're just looking at you with their eyes glossed over. So, but some are getting it. I would say some real estate investors in our network, I would say like there's 5% now who are Bitcoin maxis. They get it. I know some who have sold rental they haven't just refinanced properties to add Bitcoin to their lives. They've sold outright properties to add Bitcoin. And that would be single family home rental properties and apartment building owners in different regions of Canada. I know who have sold apartment buildings for Bitcoin. So it is happening compared to 5-6 years ago, where it was 0% of that we saw, and we get exposed to thousands of investors. Now we see some. So it's beginning. Some are getting it for sure.
I guess in a bear market, it's a lot harder, because they say like, hey, like my rental property has around the same value than it had 6 months ago. Your Bitcoin is down 40, 50, whatever the thing is currently. It's like half my net worth is gone, and I don't have income. I don't have anything else. And the leverage is also not as good as with rent, with real estate. So that they're like, in a bear market, it's probably, even though in the bear market, it's the best entry point for Bitcoin, but it's the hardest to actually explain Bitcoin to people.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And different people require different kind of things. One thing that does seem to be increasing people's willingness to listen to some of the Bitcoin stuff that we discuss would be what's going around the world right now. Does seem geopolitically that there is turbulence almost everywhere. And something that we have been explaining to some clients is that if you have a beautiful real estate portfolio that you've built over 30 or 40 years even, traditionally you've done that all in one geographical region, Canada. And in today's world, you now have geopolitical risk that if Canada changes the rules in that country and your whole portfolio is in that country, Canada, Germany, Austria, Croatia, the US, wherever it is, you're tying your 10, 20, 30 years worth of asset building to a geographical location. And the reason that you did that is we didn't easily have something that could be so globally portable. So you never really had the thought, like when we were helping people build their portfolios, you never really had the discussion of like, oh, maybe we should buy a few properties in other geographical regions until they got quite wealthy in a portfolio. So only a very small percentage of people would get to that point of the conversation of like, okay, maybe I should buy a property in Turks and Caicos or Grand Cayman, or, kind of distribute my wealth around a little bit. But now with Bitcoin, you can have those conversations with real estate investors much earlier. Even if they're buying 1 or 2 rental properties, you can say, listen, how much of your portfolio or your net worth is tied to one geographical area? You might want to buy some Bitcoin and put it into self-custody, not to avoid any of the local legislation or taxes or anything, but at least you have a chance to own that and to own that globally. We've never really had that kind of asset that can compare, where you can access the asset if you're holding it in self-custody anywhere you are in the world at any time. So there's never really been that. That's never really been something we discussed with real estate investors, because nothing like that existed, especially for people just beginning their wealth building journey, right? So it was something new that people are like, oh my gosh, you're right. I have 5 rental properties here. I need to take some of my portfolio and buy some Bitcoin. I'm too geographically exposed to this one region. And this, over the next 5, 10, and 20 years, is going to present a lot of different issues for the way people invest, and nations, how they're taxing people. It's going to get tricky, right?
It's really interesting how we Bitcoiners try, like we really want to see a healthy world, but Bitcoin seems to really benefit from an unhealthy world. if the political stages get crazier, if inflation runs high, like if everything goes bust, I think Bitcoin and maybe gold, they benefit the most from it. But Bitcoiners really don't hope for that, which is as Bitcoiner, you probably hope for high inflation, low interest rates, and all of that. But we actually cheer for the other way around. It's weird.
It's totally weird. Yeah. And it's interesting that you just brought up gold, because, that is what some people do talk to me about, is like, Tom, okay, listen, I'll kind of redistribute some of my portfolio into some gold. But if you've ever tried to travel with gold, you still are not removing the geopolitical risk that you might have. Sure, you could self-custody gold and try to put it, I don't know, in a safety deposit box, or dig a hole in your backyard and kind of hide it there. So you could kind of like, custody the gold. But if you ever are going to move quickly around the world into a different geographical location, I'm only bringing that up because a lot of our clients are talking that way right now, especially Canadians, like looking for options. It is difficult to travel with a meaningful amount of precious metals, right? So yeah, you can go to gold, but there's that. And then when they think about that, then it opens the door to discussing Bitcoin a little bit more deeply, because they're like, okay, like how would that work with Bitcoin? So then you kind of enter the conversation of like, hey, here's how you self-custody, here's what you would need, here's how it works. And then they get interested. But gold does come up, but that does have still, to me anyway, that limitation. I don't know, Robin, if you've ever bought or sold physical gold, but like, or silver, like if you do silver and you have any meaningful amount of silver, like carrying silver to the dealer to sell it back to the dealer is a heavy proposition, right? Like it's heavy stuff. You're not like traveling with silver very easily if you have, several $1,000s in silver. It's heavy. It's very heavy. So, and then on top of that, a lot of people who buy gold and silver, they're not even buying the real thing. They're just buying like a paper traded product, and then on that issue, if you buy a paper-based exposure to gold or silver, and this is something that I'll bring up a lot, I'm like, do you really own the asset that you are buying? Because if you're buying some ETF that's gold and there's some kind of financial reset of any, like imagine in a few years, we have some AI autonomous agent swarm that attacks one of the Canadian banks. The probability of that is probably low, but in today's world in 2026, it's not zero. So imagine one of the Canadian banks has an autonomous agent swarm that somehow presents some threat great enough that the bank has to close down its online banking and its operations for a few days. But you got gold to protect yourself in that situation. But if that kind of contagion spreads through some other banks and they have to like do something to stimulate the economy to save the banks and kind of debase the currency, the banks could close for 3 or 4 days until they introduce some digital ID that would allow you to log back in, quote unquote, safely and for your financial safety into the bank while they're debasing the currency. And then your gold that you thought you were buying is trapped inside a financial system. Do you actually own the gold, or do you have dollar exposure to the gold? And they could even sell the gold and just give you the dollar price of the gold at any moment while they're debasing the currency. And you might have 72 hours or 5 days of time. By the time you get your currency, is it worth what you really thought you had? I don't know if I'm being clear in that explanation, Robin, but it's something that, to me, if you're thinking about protecting your net worth, you don't want to have gold in a banking system. That's not really owning gold. You're owning paper exposure price to gold.
Isn't that the same thing more or less with real estate, where you of course you have your own keys, but because the state has the monopoly on violence, they can always take it from you, and you only own it till someone else allows you to own it, kind of thing. And also selling is like very hard because you probably can't sell it within 1 hour. You probably need like a few weeks till maybe a few months even. So then like the price changes and all of that. Like it's the same thing that you just brought up with gold, which I 100% agree with, is the same problem also kind of there with real estate.
Yeah, no, it's similar. There is one, I would give it one distinction, and one thing to me that's better is that during the period of time before the government was to impose anything so strict that would make you think, oh my gosh, I really don't own my property because the property taxes have been increased by the government to some amount, or I have to have some certain rent controls or tenant rights that I just don't agree with or whatever. At least the income component of the rental property is being paid to me directly. So there is at least that, and it might be temporary. You never know what the government could say. Maybe they say, hey, all rental properties, the income has to be paid to some government organization. And to your point, you're right. You have the keys to the house, but really, do you have the custody of the asset and are controlling it? But it is a bit better to me than having a pure stock portfolio or a real estate investment trust, because that income component, to me, there would be some time where that's still flowing to you directly. And to me, that makes it a little bit better, because at least now my family owning that asset, I am getting that income, while maybe behind the scenes, the government's, to your point, changing property tax rates and doing all kinds of weird and wonderful things with rent controls, that I really truly own that property or not. So I do appreciate that component of it. But you're right. I'm basically agreeing with you.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we've never seen something like Bitcoin, and it's still small. Like I think people overestimate the size of Bitcoin. I think we are like very small still, and also governments are still looking at Bitcoin at something like, yeah, that's a small thing. Like we don't want to, like we have some regulation, we have some things, but they don't look at it as a big thing. If you compare it to how many people own a lot of real estate to how many people own a lot of Bitcoin, the number is just like a way smaller, of course. And so it will be interesting how Bitcoin will be taxed and treated in regulations, because it's such a easy asset to get out of the country. Like you don't like it doesn't easy. It's not even in a country. Like it's never in any country. It's like it doesn't really.
It's really not even in your custody. Really, it's on the network. You have the keys, but do you really have the Bitcoin? But you have your keys. Like, I mean, you do have direct control over it.
Yeah, you have your keys, but like you could also say like, maybe I don't have the keys, like
of course
the government never, they could never know if the Bitcoin you own are the only Bitcoin you have, if you still have control over the Bitcoin, because if you do self-custody it, you can lose those keys. And there are a lot of actual real cases where people like, oh, I'm actually locked out. And now they're like, oh, you want to have capital gains on that? Yeah. Like, I can never pay that. If you do that, you bankrupt me. So it's like, it's a really interesting, I think we haven't even started to begin to see what the intersection with like governments and nation states and Bitcoin is, because it's such a unique asset with such unique attributes. where you can just take it wherever you want. And it's, as you said, it's not even really in your custody. You just have temporarily the keys to it, and you can maybe move it. So it's not really, you don't really have the Bitcoin. I mean, you have the keys so you can move those Bitcoin, but they're not really with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It took me a long time to figure that out. I'm like, oh, the Bitcoin actually lives in the network. I don't actually put it in my pocket. You know, when everybody thinks a hardware wallet is like this USB key that you put in your pocket and the Bitcoin's there, and I'm explaining to people, no, it's actually not there. It just lives on the network. But you're making me think of something kind of just about the inevitability of Bitcoin. I shared this story before somewhere. But when I was first entering the workforce after university, I went to the Royal Bank of Canada. And when you got in there to access, so this would be late 1990s, when you got into the Royal Bank, you got all your logins and stuff. And I remember asking one of my coworkers, like, hey, I want to check the scores of the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know, over my lunch hour, I want to read about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm a big hockey fan, Robin. Toronto Maple Leafs haven't won since 1967 the Stanley Cup. We are forever. Toronto Maple Leaf fans are just always praying that their team is going to win, and it hasn't won my entire life. But I wanted to check some articles about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I remember this guy saying, like, oh, you go to the Royal Bank like the intranet. And I thought, oh, like I can't get access to the internet? And I'm like, no. So I went to this intranet portal, and Royal Bank had cherry picked some articles to allow on their internal intranet that you could read. So like there was the weather, some limited sports articles, some limited news articles. It was this weird, it was the era of the portal, the internet portal. It was like a thing. And I remember thinking, like, I just want to get onto the internet. Like, I just want freedom. Like, I just want all the information. I want to go read all my stuff. But I had to wait till I went home to access the internet again, because inside the Royal Bank, it was just the intranet. And I feel like Bitcoin is the internet and the fiat dollar system is the intranet. It's this centrally controlled fiat system that is trying to survive while this open beast of an asset is setting itself up to absolutely crush it. And people don't see it, just as the people at Royal Bank didn't understand how the internet was going to crush all their little intranets and controlled versions of the internet that they were using. And to me, it's the exact same thing again. We have two networks here. One is global, open, permissionless, and secure Bitcoin. And the other is this centrally controlled fiat system that is under threat and is starting to crumble. We can all see it starting to crumble. And to me, it's obvious. I've seen this pattern play out with technology before. I'm like, oh, the open protocol is going to win. It's going to be bumpy ride as this other one tries to hang on. And, you know, right now they're trying to make it hang on with issuing stable coins, and there's USDC, and there's the American version of USDT Tether, and all these things happening. And you can see, you're like, oh, they're trying to save this old system, just like intranets were tried to be made as the thing that you paid attention to, but everybody just morphed over to the internet over time. It's the same thing happening now with Bitcoin and the fiat system to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you study network effects, and I try to do that, open source networks tend to actually win on a broad scale, and then on tiny niches, closed source usually wins. And so what I mean by that is the standard open source standard is like TCP/IP, the internet, this is the open source network that won. But then on the product layer, on the individual layer, closed source actually won. Like we have, we use Facebook and Google and Amazon, they're all closed source, and they are open source kind of products against that. There's like an open source Google Maps that you can use. I think Open Maps is actually called. And so there's like for everything, there's like an open source competitor. Now, even social media now with Nostr, there's like an open source competitor, which is interesting if it can get ahead. And it actually makes me think about if the same thing will happen to Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is the money of the world, kind of the infrastructure, the financial infrastructure. And then on top of that, people actually use Stretch for their savings account, and they use some Lightning layer 2 for transacting, and some exchange app, and like they use all those closed source things, and Bitcoin wins, but it only wins as the infrastructure play, and there's only a tiny actual players that play on the infrastructure, and then there's like the masses are on those like closed source things on top of it, which even if this is the case, nobody's stopping you from having real Bitcoin. But it makes me think, like, if you see the internet, how it developed, the open source won, but on the individual side, on top of the open source, the closed source ones, which is I can't still wrap my head around that weird thing where you want the open sourceness, you want the network effect of the whole internet, but then you use like Google, you use Facebook, you use all those like closed source things. I don't know if you have thoughts on that. The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relai to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are two main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relai, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember in the early tech days of the early 2000s when Linux first started coming out, I was working at Oracle Corporation at the time, and big enterprises were starting to come under pressure by the tech crowd that was in the corporations to stop using Sun Solaris and AIX, Unix, and the corporate Unix servers, and replace them with Linux, which was the open source kind of solution. It's exactly to your point. And you just made me realize that they didn't really go there. Corporations didn't really go there because they were nervous. Like, if something went wrong with Linux, who would they point the finger to? Because if you're the CIO of a big bank and you put in Linux and it's an open source project and something goes wrong with Linux, then it's your team that screwed it up and you are now directly responsible. And the IT teams at the time didn't want that. But when Red Hat came out and Red Hat Linux said, hey, we will offer a flavor of the open source Linux, but we will offer you support. So if there's ever a problem, you can call us and we will take care of it. It began to explode. And it started entering into the corporations that we were selling Oracle stuff to. You had started seeing more and more Red Hat Linux in these corporations. And now Linux is like everywhere. And you just made me realize, because I hadn't thought about this before, that with Bitcoin, it's kind of similar. Early adopters were individuals, the techie crowd that got in there. But now the next layer is almost like with IBIT or BlackRock's ETF product. The more mainstream people who want to be able to point the finger, don't want the self-custody, don't want all the problems that might come up with owning your own sovereignty, are buying it through an ETF, right? Just like Red Hat kind of removed that concern for people in corporations deploying open source Linux, the ETFs are offering that to the mainstream to buy Bitcoin in that capacity. You and I get to own pure Bitcoin in self-custody. We get to own a part of the protocol, which is weird because you can't own part of TCP/IP, but we get to own part of which is huge. Like, imagine that. There's a protocol layer of value, and our families get to own a piece of it. Are you kidding me? But a whole bunch of other people are going to go through the ETF route, and it's likely going to explode over the next 10 years, just like Linux did when people could kind of remove some of the ownership, direct ownership of deploying it themselves and point the finger if something went wrong. People can point the finger to the ETF and say, they're going to control the keys. They're going to handle it. It's in my retirement fund. It's easy. I never really thought about it that way. So yeah, there's going to be this open source thing. And then there's these closed kind of like products or services on top of Bitcoin. But you and I can be the real Bitcoin owners, which will be, to me, this is like a legendary time in history.
I bring that up because I saw that today and I tweeted it out. I saw that from River, which I always loved the River stuff. They put out really cool statistics. And this kind of was for me a little bit shocking.
Yeah.
When you see the change in ownership. Now, granted, most Bitcoin are still owned by individuals.
Individuals still are the majority. Yes,
by far. Yeah, like it's like over 10 million. I think it's like 13 million. Like it's like a huge portion of Bitcoin. So it's not as bad as you might think just seeing on that one statistic. But it does made me think about that coming back to closed source systems, people buying the IBIT ETF, they're buying Stretch, they're buying MSTR, they keep their Bitcoin on the exchanges, or like any of those. I mean, I guess in those things, the Bitcoin on exchange would still count as individuals. I don't know if how they did it, but it just shows me like people are flocking to those institutions because they don't want to be the guy that lost Bitcoin on a hard drive and then is searching on some dumpster.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if you are a small to medium-sized business, it doesn't surprise me to see the business one increasing, because until recently, how would a business custody Bitcoin? Like, let's say there's two partners that own a medium-sized business in the 8 figures, doing $10 to $50 million in revenues, and they start to decide they want to allocate Bitcoin to their balance sheet. I could see them very easily deciding to use the ETF product, whereas before, I would encourage them to have self-custody, but I could see them going to the ETF product for their business if they were putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet, because it's easy. It's just in their investment. A business can open up an investment account, and then that business can allocate on their balance sheet investments. There's a login to the investment account. They can give that login in their, the estate planning or the corporate planning documentation of the business, can record that information. So, multiple people can get access to it if needed with the proper authority. But if they're going to go to self-custody on the Bitcoin, the businesses could hold off because, which party are they going to use multi-sig? How does the multi-sig work? There's all these debates, and it maybe slows them down, where businesses now are picking up their allocation to Bitcoin because it's just easier, because of, like you said, how it's wrapped up in some other things and gets easier access. So I think that's just going to explode over the next little while. And it's unfortunate because I think you and I want the individuals to keep owning the Bitcoin.
Yeah, I do want that a lot, because I think I think there's this debate sometimes going on, is decentralization a scale or a binary? I think it's a scale. And so there is something like Bitcoin can be more decentralized and can be less decentralized. And if you have more active economic nodes, it's more decentralized. If we have more people that own Bitcoin, it's more decentralized because there are more people with a financial incentive to care about Bitcoin. If we have more individual miners, it's better have more individual miners than having like 5 big corporation miners that control most of the network. So it's like I'm always rooting for more decentralization and also in ownership. Now, granted, it's not proof of stake. Just because you own Bitcoin, you don't have control over Bitcoin. So even if someone has 2 million Bitcoin or 3 million Bitcoin in like his hands and like just like himself, he would not have any power over Bitcoin outside of like he could dump 1 million Bitcoin and probably crash the price significantly. But this is just like normal market dynamics. So that is the aspect of it doesn't really concern me for the security and decentralization of Bitcoin that the ownership gets shifted, but I still root for decentralized ownership where individuals have it and as many as possible. But it might just be dreaming from us.
It might be, but it's fun to dream. It's fun to think that there could be a generation of sovereign individuals roaming the world that have the best interests of their community, their families, their community, the people around them in mind, and that are free to offer the world their unique best skill because they don't have to be forced into a job or career that pays the bills. They have enough money that goes up in purchasing power in their lives where they can offer their true unique gifts to the world and to their community. So it's fun to dream that we could have thousands and thousands of people in that capacity where we really haven't had that. So many people with beautiful, unique gifts are forced into careers in traditional finance or some insurance job or a real estate career or, driving a bus or whatever it is they're doing to pay the bills. Whereas if they could present their unique skill and highest and best use to the community and earn value back for that and save that value in something like Bitcoin that increases in purchasing power over time, the community is just better off. Like humanity is expressing its highest and best use in multiple nodes, each individual is doing that. And we all live a better life. And not only that, the second order effect of that is that you have an older generation now that is not forced into retirement homes, clipping coupons, hoping that their fixed income products pay the bills, but their fixed income doesn't keep up with inflation. So all they do every day is worry about paying the rent at the old age place that they're in, buying food to what kind of food can they buy? And their whole, last chapter of their lives becomes fear of running out of money. Can they outpace the increasing costs of their basic necessities? But if they had a purchasing power that could be stored in something that goes up in value, they can now live a peaceful life. And to me, these are the older elders that have the wisdom that should be spending their time presenting that wisdom back into the community. But instead, they're obsessed with, and rightly so, they're obsessed with protecting their purchasing power so that they can live and survive. Imagine occupying the last stages of your life. You're young, Robin. Imagine occupying the last stages of your life in your 70s. You've worked your whole life and you thought you saved up enough, but now inflation's ripping faster than it was ripping that you had planned for. And you're looking at your purchasing power go down faster than you thought. And you have things with advancements in maybe medicine that are extending your life. Your whole life now becomes fearful of running out of money. So we have a generation of older people who really are occupying their time with fear instead of occupying their time with giving back to the community, which is probably what they really want to do. They want to have that time freedom to just give back to the community, but they're obsessed with, just surviving. So we've created this angst across society at all levels. You have a younger generation that doesn't know how they're going to afford to buy a house pretty much across the entire world. You have an older generation that's scared of running out of money, so they don't want any changes. Keep the interest rates low, keep the interest rates low, keep the house prices high. We don't want any changes. We're trying to survive. We've been backed ourselves into this corner where every generation along the way is scared for different reasons, and it doesn't have to be that way.
I love that. And it made me think about in Austria, and I probably think it's the same way in Canada, it's a dream for many people to own their own home. It's like having that home and like buying that is a dream for many, and especially the generation like 1-2 generations up from me. I'm Gen Z. They really all went for like, we want to own our own home, and this is also part of our retirement. This is the security, the safety that we have, and we are okay with spending 30 years, spending 20 years to paying that mortgage off, to pay those loans off, which I think is crazy to many different, because of many different reasons. And I have that dream that owning real Bitcoin UTXOs on the main chain will become the dream on one point for people, because I think the UTXOs on the main chain is like the will be at some point hard to actually get. Now it's like unimaginable to like, yeah, of course you can get real UTXOs for like $100. Like you can just get put $100 on Bitcoin and you can transact with that. The fee is like, I don't know, 50 cents or like $1 for a transaction for a Bitcoin. But I do think this will get more expensive and it will get harder to be on the main chain, especially when everything is in this open network coming on top of Bitcoin. Transaction fees will rise and all of those things. And so I think it might actually be that the dream of owning real Bitcoin UTXOs is like the new dream for the people that get born in like 10 years.
Robin, absolutely. You remind me of an old Italian guy. You know why? When I was born in Canada, you know, I mentioned that, you know, my father's Croatian, my mother's Scottish, immigrants to Canada. I'm born here. In the 1960s and 70s in Canada, a lot of Italians came here. And because real estate was like the thing, a lot of them bought land on the very outskirts of Toronto. So far out of Toronto, the people kind of laughed. Like, oh, like, why are you buying the land out there? There's like cows grazing on that land. Like, you're not developing that land. You have to pay the taxes on the land. Why are you buying that land? Over the next 10, 20, 30 years, Toronto expands aggressively. The city bumps into the farmland that they purchased that everyone laughed at. So much so that I know Italian families that bought that land who were laughed at years ago, who got so wealthy of selling the land to real estate developers who now wanted that land. They're building wings on hospitals with their names on it around Toronto because they made so much money selling the real estate. Your generation, to me, is the old Italian person in Toronto who was buying the land in the 1960s and 70s. You're buying the Bitcoin. You're buying the digital real estate. When everyone's looking at you going, hey, Zoomer, what are you doing with your digital kind of play toy Bitcoin? And mark my words, and I don't think it's going to be 10 or 20 or 30 years. I think it's going to be sooner, 3, 5, 7 years when people look at Robin going, what's that thing that you were buying again? How did you figure out to buy it? And this is the opportunity. Because back then people laughed at that real estate, just as people are laughing at the digital real estate right now because they don't understand it. They didn't understand the demographics and the population growth of Toronto and how much immigration population was growing that city and the demand that was going to put on that land. And you're buying Bitcoin and people don't understand the demand that's coming in. And I will simply say to them, and this is what I talk to some of our clients about, how much further do you think the digital economy is going to grow compared to where it is today? Take the existing analog type physical economy and take the digital economy. How much further do you think it's going to grow? Do you think it's going to grow a little bit? Or do you think it's going to grow quite a bit, compounded over the next 10 years? And what piece of digital real estate would you like to own in that ecosystem? Some of the other cryptos that are basically all junk as far as I can tell, like they're distributed databases where somebody's controlling something, or do you want this non-issuer digital commodity that is like the purest expression of real estate in the digital world that is completely finite and global? And I when I hear you share that, I agree 100%. So to all the younger generations, Zoomers and millennials that are in our office and I talk to, I'm like, hey, don't make fun of the boomers buying the real estate. You have the opportunity to buy the Bitcoin right now. And mark my words, Gen Alpha or whatever's coming next, they're going to point to you as the bad guy because they're going to look at Robin and say, Robin, you bought the Bitcoin when it was that price. That's not fair. Just like Zoomers and millennials point to boomers and say, you bought the real estate when it was that price. That's not fair. Robin, it's coming for you.
I love that so much, and I mean we already kind of see it coming. I think there is, especially in like more socialist countries, like which I am also in Austria and Europe. We think a lot of socialist agendas. There will soon be that debate going on. How should we tax Bitcoin? Because it's unfair that someone buying Bitcoin for $4,000 in 2020, now Bitcoin is at, let's just say, I don't know, 800,000 in 2030, made that much money in 10 years. And people will be like, oh yeah, like he made of nothing something, and he just speculated. And so I think this will be kind of like the thing like, oh, they just speculated that outside of Toronto, there will maybe something come there. And they did not know that. They had no clue and they were just blindly speculating. And so they should now pay their speculator tax and they should pay a fair rate to their people, which I fully disagree with, obviously. But I think it's 100% coming. The envy of towards Bitcoiners, and that's actually a small motivation for my channel, because I know I can at least point to here. Starting with in 2023 in November, I made an episode a day, screaming on the top of my lungs, buy Bitcoin, hold on to it. It will be fucking awesome for you. So nobody, yes. Nobody can tell me. Since I'm 21 years old, I'm telling everyone to buy Bitcoin, and this is now since, well, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years or so. So it's not a big motivation of mine, but it's a small thing where I'm thinking of, like, if someone tells me like, oh, like, why didn't you tell me about Bitcoin? Like, I literally base my life off Bitcoin. There's nothing outside that you cannot count at me. So that's I don't know, a personal hedge that I'm doing, and I encourage other people to use that same motivation to tell people about Bitcoin, because they might come back. Like, imagine you have a best friend and you come to him and say like, oh wait, this was crazy. The last 10 years, Bitcoin went from like 4K to like 1 million. Have you heard about it? And he's like, yeah, I'm holding it since 10 years. And like, you never told me. Like, you don't want to be that friend that never tells anyone and just goes ridiculously rich of it.
Yeah. And then think of the people coming behind you. Like, my brother's daughters are younger. So one of them has been exposed to Bitcoin. I should know this. I'm her uncle. I can't recall if she's 12 now. I can't recall. But let's say she's been exposed to the idea of Bitcoin since she was 6 years old. Since 6 years old. So she's going to grow up into her adolescence here and young adulthood. All she's going to know is Bitcoin. Like, it's going to be so normal. So we have this generation of people who are starting to struggle understanding it. And you have this next younger generation that's coming up, the children of Bitcoiners, and that's all they know. It's going to be so normal for them. And the price fluctuations and the fiat dollar price of it is going to be so normal. So we have this generation that we talked about earlier that can't handle the price generations. We're creating another generation. The price fluctuations are going to be like, what do you like? Why is that an issue? This is what Bitcoin does in fiat dollar terms. It's completely normal. Like you said, it could go to 800,000. It might drop to 400,000. Everybody will be screaming that it's like over, and they'll just be like, this is just normal. What are you even talking about? If if I can earn a little bit more, I'll earn a little bit more. I try to take that angle with some people as well. And there is something I have tried to explain. I don't know if this works or not, but sometimes we'll try to, with our clients, to explain that, the Bitcoin's not changing. It's like the fiat system that we are very confident is just going to continue in the madness. And the way I try to explain it is I say, look, if you reverse the economy to the very first dollar that ever came into an existence, that dollar that came into existence, into the circulating money supply, not the base money for all the economists out there who argue about such silly things, but the M2 that comes into circulation, that first dollar that comes into circulation comes in with interest, because all money is borrowed into existence in our current system. So if the first dollar that came into existence, it came into existence, that dollar, but owed back to the issuer of that dollar, who you borrowed it from, is it, let's say, $1.10 if the interest was 10%. So the whole economy has $1, but you owe back $1.10 to who created that first dollar. You owe that back to them. How do you create that extra 10 cents to pay back? The only way you can do it is you have to borrow more. So let's say you borrow another dollar to try to pay that extra 10 cents back. Well, now you have $2 in the economy, but $2.20 is owed back to the issuer of the currency. So you borrow another dollar. Now you're at $3, but $3.30 is owed back. The only way the fiat dollar system can continue is if credit perpetually expands forever. And that is what gives me confidence in Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin doesn't have this. Bitcoin is what it is. A block is created every 10 minutes. There's a finite amount. It's global, permissionless, and secure. And the fiat system has to create endless dollars for it to survive. Because if you don't borrow more dollars into existence, the whole thing crumbles because there will not be enough dollars to pay back what was borrowed plus the interest. It requires more borrowing to continue. And that's why we always have these big stimulus packages. There's always these problems that we have to issue new money because the system demands that. It's by design. So I try to pull people back to the first dollar that ever came in so they can kind of understand that, like, this is how the system works. Bitcoin allows you to remove yourself from that system and store some of your purchasing power in a system that doesn't have this base level problem.
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use Simple Mining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. I love that example. And I think Lynn Alden kind of puts it really nicely. Nothing stops this train. Like we cannot really stop this thing called money printing. And so even Bitcoiners, like economics, like they always argue, like, what will Jerome Powell do? What will now the new Fed chair that Trump will appoint? I don't know if they're already appointed. I don't pay attention too much to that. Will do, and like, will they lower interest rates? Will they what will they do? And I'm like, yeah, that might affect the Bitcoin price in the next 2 months. I get that. But also it might not. And also, does it really matter? Because they anyways have to keep printing money and they have a debt problem, and like anything is like it anyways goes in one direction only. They can choose how far, like they're driving against the wall and they're choosing how fast they're driving against that wall, but the wall is coming.
The wall is, I remember when we started this business, when I left tech and started in this real estate business with my brother, during the great financial crisis, we finally decided to do a deep dive on money. And I looked at the US debt at that time. It was $8 trillion, 2008. And I remember calculating the compound annual growth rate of the debt from like the previous 10 years and thinking, oh my God, if this continues, it's going to be like $14 trillion by the year. I think it was like 2016 or something like that. And actually hit that number sooner. But we gave a presentation to our clients in 2010 and we shared that data with them. And people were like, no, Tom, it can never hit. That's insane. That would like be double what it is now. And the history of America is like, several hundred years old, and it took it that long to get to 8 trillion. It can't get to like 14, 15, 16 trillion in that short of a time. It's just not going to happen. They're going to slow this down. Here we are in the year 2026, and it's what, like $38 trillion? It not only did it hit the 16 trillion, it just like blew right through it, right? So what is it right now? 38.7.
Yeah, 38.7. So it will soon hit 39. It's not that long.
Yeah, so 2026, we're more than double the 16 trillion that I said it was going to hit. And this is where I agree with you. It's like, who cares who the next Fed person, when you know the system, you need some liquidity, sure. I'm not telling everybody, there's some people are living straight off the Bitcoin standard, sure. But if you're going to keep some dollars for your monthly living, sure, that's fine. But your long-term savings Why wouldn't you want it in an instrument like Bitcoin, a real form to me of money? That it's just a not when you're being debased at this rate. I think in Canada, I know the M2 debasement rate since 1973 to today is 8.12% compounded annually. So, and if that 8%, so that's what the M2 is being debased at 8%. But then the price inflation don't show up at an even 8% because a lot of people like steak, for example. So you'll get beef prices that spike higher than 18%. So all the things I like tend to be in demand. So for my family, I'm like, I have to outpace like 12% debasement. That's the hurdle rate. So when I talk to some of my friends who are working with financial planners and they're using like a 5 or 6% rate, thinking they're being very conservative in the rate they have to outpace the inflation at, I'm like, God, you guys are insane. It's like double that. Look at the amount of debt that's being printed everywhere, right? So yeah.
And
Wild stuff.
a recent guest brought this up to me. I think it was 1/3 of the debt is kind of maturing this year in 2026. It's called the 2026 debt wall. If people want to Google that,
I think it's 9 trillion. You're right. I think it's 9 trillion throughout 2026.
Which is crazy. Like, and of course they will roll it over. It's like not that, like, I think USA will not go bankrupt this year, but like it just shows how huge this problem is, and like how this just like it just keeps on going. And like I think this is something where people like say, oh, but those people, they will never allow that to happen. And yeah, they said the same thing in Germany. Like the Weimar, like they said the same thing everywhere where the hyperinflation happened.
They said the same thing in the 1990s in Yugoslavia, when it was Yugoslavia, when Croatia, when they went through that war there, the currency hyperinflated. That was just the 1990s.
It's crazy. Yeah, like they always say the same
I know
thing.
people, I have family there. I know people, when the inflation was ripping in the 1990s, the moment you got paid, you ran to the general store there to buy what was on the shelves, because that day the prices were going to go up because the inflation was ripping so hard. So you literally got paid and you ran. And sometimes barter began to break out a little bit, because if you knew a farmer that had like a pig or a donkey or a horse that you needed, they began trading stuff because the currency started kind of losing value. They had to go back to that because the currency was just losing value so quickly. When hyperinflation really ripped and they changed the currency, my aunt went to the bank in Croatia. I can't remember if I told you this before. And there was a plexiglass type box at the bank, and they didn't even count her old currency. They just said, stuff all the currency notes in there. When the box is full, if you can fill the box, we'll give you like 5 units of the new currency. They didn't even count the denomination. Robin, they didn't even count it. It's just whatever you had to, we're not going to count it. Just stuff it in the box. They would close the lid, and if the box was full, then you got like $5 of the new currency. I don't know if it was the kuna at the time or what it was when that change first happened. I don't know if they did a second dinar before the kuna, but yeah, that's how that worked. Can you imagine? So if you were a middle-class person in the 1990s in that area of the world, if you were poor and you lived off the land and had some animals, you kind of weren't affected. Your animals were your assets, really. You were eating potatoes and eating some prosciutto, and you're poor. You were living off the land. You were not affected. The wealthy had control of some assets, or were going to get, given some assets. There's a lot of talk about what happened there. And so they were going to be okay. But if you were in the middle and you had some currency-based savings, you were just annihilated. You were just completely annihilated because that currency just got washed. And that's what Canadians don't get. The poor, unaffected. The wealthy, unaffected. That chunk in the middle, who has dollar exposure to things or dinar exposure to things, you're just washed, and it happens fast.
Yeah, it's an exponential curve. The being in this exponential last like 10% is the one where it goes so quick, you don't even know how fast it's happening. And I love that you brought the example of like currency exchanges, because every single time I travel somewhere else and I have to deal with their local currency, which gets less and less because now you can pay everything with like Apple Pay and credit cards. So like I usually don't even have the cash of the country anymore. But I was recently in India, and there was not a lot of credit card payment, so I had to get like physical cash. I forgot how rupees. Was it rupees? Yeah, I think they have rupees.
I think it is. Yes.
I think it's called rupees. And it's crazy for me because you get there and €1 is like 100 rupees. and you go to the restaurant and you see those prices written of like, yeah, like this meal costs 473 rupees. and whenever you get out of your like in your small town and you get out in the world and you have like somewhere else where you go interact with other people's money, like other currencies, you realize, oh wow, like it's like just play money. Like it doesn't mean anything. There's no value to that. I just get for that one paper 100 other papers, and I can pay with 400 of those papers. I get some meal. It's just paper, and it's just like play money. It really feels when you're in another country like monopoly money. Like what is the difference to monopoly money? Yeah, like the real one is a little bit nicer. It's a little bit. It looks a little bit better than the actual monopoly cash money. So every time I travel, I feel like I really get that fiat thing is just like nothing. It's play money. It doesn't feel right or interesting or nothing at all.
Yeah, it's a story. Yeah, agreed. And it's funny because when we go in the summers to Croatia on the coast, before they joined the euro 6-7 years ago, whatever it was, and they started using the euro as a currency there in the last 3 or 4 years, it was the kuna, and you would pay in kuna at the restaurants and stuff. But whenever you did something that was a bit more expensive, like rent a boat to go out on the coast, they would always ask for euro. And I always find that interesting. I'm like, oh, okay, your local currency's kuna, but it was, it had problems. I don't know if you probably, through the 2010s, they had such problems there that the banks were issuing mortgages in Croatia in Swiss francs, denominated in Swiss francs, because they didn't trust their own currency. But people were getting paid in kuna. And then there was a currency issue, I want to say in 2012 or 14 or something like that. And the government had to step in because people were earning kuna, but it lost value against the Swiss franc so much that they couldn't make their mortgage payments because the mortgage payments were denominated in Swiss franc, the better currency. And they were earning kuna that lost value. So nothing really changed except your currency lost value. And now you have to pay double the amount to make your mortgage payment. And that's the devastation of not holding the hardest currency, the hardest money, because the Swiss franc was harder than the kuna. So the people earning the kuna got devastated when that happened. And to me, I look at that between the euro and the kuna, how people wanted the euro. They knew they wanted the harder money. They didn't want the kuna for their boat trip. They wanted the euro, and they wanted it paid in cash. They wanted the euro, the harder. And to me, that's the thing that people have to deal with, whether they decide to participate with Bitcoin or not. It's a line in Saifedean's book. I think it's the top of page 34 on the Bitcoin Standard. It says, you can't ignore the ramifications of a harder currency. You can maybe ignore it, but you're not going to ignore the ramifications of a harder currency existing, because that harder currency is going to go up in purchasing power and you're going to lose value against it. So you can choose to ignore it, but the fact that it exists means you're going to have to deal with it. And that line, I remember in that book, top of page 34, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, because I was kind of ignoring Bitcoin at that time. And I thought, what is happening here? I have to pay attention to this, So yeah, the currencies are wild, people can choose to ignore Bitcoin, but they're not going to be able to ignore the consequences of choosing to ignore Bitcoin.
And I loved so much because when you said previously that like they got the money and they ran to the general store, I think this is how I feel when I get paid. I just run the Bitcoin. Whenever I know there's some money coming in, like tomorrow or so, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm getting nervous right before, and I'm keep checking my bank and like, it's here, Bitcoin, nice.
And because you're a Bitcoiner, if the fiat dollar price is down, you're actually excited. Like, you want to get paid so that you can quickly allocate it to, but you're the opposite. You're not panicking. The price is down. You're like, oh my gosh, I need these fiat dollars now to quickly exchange them into Bitcoin. Yeah, you're a true Bitcoiner. It's wild. We're weird people. We're weird people, Robin.
It's interesting because before, I agree to that 100%. But before I started the podcast business, it was just like once a month I got my money and it was automated, and I just like made my transaction in Bitcoin. It was actually less chaotic, but now I have different clients, I have different things, so there's like multiple times in a month, probably multiple times in a week where there is money coming in somehow, and so like I have this feeling every time like, oh wait, oh, today, oh, I have money, Bitcoin. Like, like this feeling when you like want to convert it. And now a nice thing started happening where I get paid also some parts directly in Bitcoin, which is,
Okay.
I think, the best feeling,
Congrats.
because then you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But I really remember that feeling because I run to Bitcoin. Like when the bank hits, and I think my girlfriend really knows about that, it's almost like I go in a trance. I have to go on my phone. I have to convert it. I have to get it. It's all like it's in the middle of a dinner, and I'm like, I have to convert some Bitcoin now.
Yeah, totally. I totally get it. And somehow you saying this just reminded me of some of my friend group that is now converting to being open to Bitcoin. And I was in the software industry for I guess about 10 years, 10 years, Oracle, and then 2 years at NetSuite before it went public. And that group of people never really communicated with me about real estate too much. A bunch of them did buy some rental properties with us as I went into real estate and the rental property stuff. But in the last, I would say 6 months, a chunk of of my software friends have now reached out to talk to me and ask more questions about Bitcoin because of artificial intelligence. And they're seeing what's happening to their industry. And they're nervous about the decrease in labor force in their industry. They're now trying to look for something that has a moat. And the only thing digitally that they can find that they think has a moat is Bitcoin. So they're finally starting to ask me some questions about, is Bitcoin really like this? How does the mining work? How does this work? Like some of them didn't understand nodes. They didn't understand the miners. So I've been writing out on a whiteboard like the architecture of how Bitcoin works, and they're starting to get it. And this was a group of people who ignored it because they were making great money and they were winning. They didn't really care. But now that whole industry, and the software industry, depending on what you count, it's like 30 to 50% of the S&P 500. And this amount of money, to me, is going to be reallocated somewhere, and Bitcoin is going to absorb some of that. And I can see it with people reaching out to me from the software industry. One of them is a global software as a service company. They do expense management software for Fortune 500 companies. They've let go like 70% of his team that would do the demos for their new clients because they don't need all of those team members to make the demos with artificial intelligence anymore. They can make the demos just something that would take them 4 months. One of my friends was describing to me, I think 4 months and like 6 people, he could do in 4 days with one person. So like that industry is having a bit of a wake-up call. And I think Bitcoin is in the narrative of being a piece of software. So like it might be coming down, it might be like coming down in price, maybe because some people are associating it as software. But once these people are understanding that this is very different, that it's a sound form of digital money, their eyes are being opened. So that's interesting to see. I didn't see that before. That's new. I'd say last 6 months that's happening to me.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think Bitcoin slowly enters that era of it getting to be more recognized and more as a serious thing. It has been surviving for so long, and it got established now with presidents not talking about it, big institutions not talking about it, corporations buying it. And all those things were not there like a couple of years ago. I mean, strategy was for a very long time basically the only buyer. I mean, there was Tesla, there was like other people also, but it was like very small instances and also very small amounts. And so I think over the last 2-3 years with the ETF, with the booming businesses buying it, and with even the political level talking about it, it really got to a level where it kind of got, how should I say it? It kind of got the stamp of the approval of the traditional system. Bitcoiners really don't care about that, and I also don't care about that. But like outside of Bitcoin, people care about that.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
And so I think this is what like slowly kind of I think is happening. And I like that we focus on like Bitcoin as there's like chance for younger people, and also like for like basically for everyone, but especially for younger people, because I don't think we can count on our retirement. Like I myself, like I have to pay into a retirement. I cannot swap it to Bitcoin. Like Austria has weird rules.
Okay.
I write that payment off as a tax. Like I'm like, I know I will never see that money ever again. If I see it ever again, I'm happy. But I'm writing it off as like I will never see
Cost
it
of
again.
doing business in Austria. Yeah.
Cost of doing business in Austria. And I just focus on Bitcoin as my retirement plan. Like that's how I look at Bitcoin currently.
Yeah, I agree. Once you go down the rabbit hole, it's, it's just yeah, this is never ending, as we both know. It's funny. I read that book, The Sovereign Individual. I have it on my bookshelf back here. I read that book in the early 2000s. And I remember closing the book thinking, I read something really important, because it talked about this. It talked about a digital money coming out that couldn't be stopped. And at the time, I knew I read something important, but I didn't realize how it would evolve, right? I wish I paid more attention so that when Bitcoin came out, I jumped on it a little sooner. I'm not going to lie. I ignored it for so many years, Robin. I laughed it off in I feel like 2015, 2016, definitely when it was like doing its 2017 thing, I laughed it off. I remember one client of mine, and I think 2018 or so, put his arm around me at a conference saying, I'm really surprised you haven't figured out Bitcoin yet. And I looked at him like, what? You know, when someone kind of shocks you, like, what? And I remember walking away from that, and then he just walked away. It was like a Bitcoiner, just like putting his shoulder, giving you the comment, and then just walking off into the sunset. And it just stunned me. And I still did nothing. Robin. It's 2020. I finally sat down and kind of read about it. And it was like Seyfedin's book when he broke it all down. He did, the first 4 chapters of the Bitcoin Standard are all about like just macro, the economy and how it works. And then the technical architecture comes later. And I remember learning about it going, oh my gosh, I totally misunderstood this thing. Jeez. Anyway, we've all been there.
Yeah. I think especially because you come from real estate.
And a database company. I was at Oracle, a database company. Like I was at a database company, Robin. I have no excuses, but the data, I have no excuse. But it's also why some of these other cryptos never really interested me, because I remember reading about them. I'm like, what's this blockchain thing? It's like a slow database that solves no purpose. Like just use a database. If you're going to be controlled by a group of people, why not just use a straight up database? You can give open access to the database. Multiple people can have the admin login to the database and they can control it. Why do you need to do this blockchain stuff? Like, I don't get it. You can like do the same thing in a database. You can even distribute the database if you want around the world. This is possible. So this other coins just confused me. I could for 2 years, I was like, I don't understand. Like, I'm the problem. What is wrong? I don't get these other coins. I don't understand. Where's the value? They're controlled by people who have admin access to the issuance of the coin. So it's like having a database where you're holding some very special information, but other people can change that information. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, why is that good? I like Bitcoin. That can't happen, because that can't happen with Bitcoin. Why? For a couple of years, I walked around like I swear it was like a fog. For like 2020 to 2022, I was like, I don't get this other stuff. Why? What am I missing? But anyway.
You weren't missing anything with crypto, with blockchain.
No, I wasn't. And then eventually that's what I conclude. I'm like, oh, I'm not missing anything. It is like a distributed database, and you give the admin login to someone else. That's not what you want,
100%. Absolutely not. One more thing, two more things actually I want to talk with you because of real estate and Bitcoin is, I think the more interesting part, and maybe we already touched on it a little bit, is the Bitcoin making housing affordable again. I think this is something I am super passionate about, because I do want to actually own my own home at some point, but I just see it now as like an absolute waste of money of like owning my own home. So I just like as pure my own thoughts. I do not want to have those high real estate prices in the future. And so measured in Bitcoin, I hope that it's very cheap to own, like in 10, 20 years a home. This is something really interesting. And then the second thing, I don't know if it's connected to that, is how we talked about how beautiful Vienna is, I think, before the start of the show. And then here you can see a little bit of like the gold history also happening in Vienna. What do you think if Bitcoin actually has an impact on the architectures and how homes and things are made. Because I get that argument a lot from not a lot, but from people that think about architecture and real estate and think about Bitcoin also. And then they say that because we go back to sound money and to hard money, properties and buildings will get better again and will get be built more beautiful again, like we did it in the gold standard. I'm not 100% sure about that, I would definitely hope so, because when I look through Vienna and they have some very beautiful and very old buildings, and I'm like, wow, that's fucking awesome. We're no longer building those things. All the new buildings are like gray blocks and some glass, and I'm like, yeah, it doesn't look too bad, but it's nothing really nice. There's like, that doesn't have something uniqueness. How do you think is the overall impact from Bitcoin on architecture and real estate?
Yeah, I think architecture is going to come back. I'll explain why in a second. The first part of your question on monetization of real estate and the prices coming down in real estate, I believe will happen, because when I was a kid and I got my first debit card, bank machine card in the 1980s, you had two big buttons on the bank machines, checking and savings. And you did have a saving. Everyone did put money in their savings. It was the 1980s, like the debasement from, leaving the gold standard in the 1970s was taking off, but it really wasn't that extended at that point. People still did like save in the currency, kind of held some value. And then in the last 20 years in Canada, nobody used the savings button on their machine for real savings. The houses became the second button. It was like if you went to the bank machine, you would see your checkings account, and the other button for savings might as well just been a house icon, because everybody just started putting any savings they had into real estate, because maybe they couldn't articulate the reason, but they saw real estate prices going up in dollar terms. They didn't associate that with the dollar losing value. They associated it with real estate is good, it's going up in price. So everyone kind of chased into the real estate game. Now with Bitcoin, I think that's going to reverse. The younger generations, definitely people like yourself, people in our office, the millennials and Zoomers, definitely understand that concept. So I think real estate prices will adjust in Bitcoin terms, and they have been in Bitcoin terms, and they will come down in value, continue to come down in value against Bitcoin. And then I think that's going to increase the architecture, because Toronto's a perfect example. We have all these kind of tiny condos in the heart of the city that are tiny, like shoeboxes, that people were buying as their savings, right? Their investors were buying these as their savings. But that's going to change to me with Bitcoin, but it's going to change the architecture as well, because as a better money comes in, why would people separate themselves from a very good quality money for a poor piece of real estate? When people like you recognize that, wait, the money I hold is the most pristine collateral the world has ever known, why am I going to give that money up for a box, a type of real estate that looks awful? Your actions are going to demand that architecture return, because the only way to separate Robin from his Bitcoin in the future will be to present beautiful things, beautiful architecture, beautiful clothing, beautiful cars. So to me, the second order effect of Bitcoin is that beauty, there's going to be a renaissance in artistic beauty in all things, because to separate you people from your Bitcoin, it's going to demand that. So to me, absolutely architecture returns. And it might not be as fast as you and I want. Like it might take some time, right? Because Bitcoin has to demonetize other assets, grow in value further. But I think it's going to demand that, because people like you aren't going to spend their money on a box in the sky, a tiny little condo with glass around it. They're going to demand better real estate. So I think you're going to be able to buy what you want, and you're going to get a better quality product. So yeah, I think both are happening for sure. The time frame, I think we can argue about the time frame. I don't know exactly, but I think it's sooner than later.
I like the aspect of because the Bitcoiners will understand the value of Bitcoin, and they know it's something very valuable, and so they would only exchange it for something that also has a lot of value. It just only makes sense. If you have fiat laying around, you're like, yeah,
you want to burn it. You want to just get rid of it. When people have fiat, when people get an inheritance in Canada, they get nervous. oh my God, I got a big inheritance of fiat dollars. I have to invest in real estate. I have to do some stuff with it. They can't maybe articulate why, but they unconsciously know they have to do something quickly. Whereas Bitcoin, if you were to imagine inheriting a big chunk of Bitcoin, Bitcoiners are going to be like, I don't need to do anything else. This is actually, I'm keeping this. You know what I mean? But in fiat, they look to spend it. They buy whatever, buy some investment condos, buy some rental properties, buy some stocks, buy some equities, buy some insurance, get it out of the fiat. They can't articulate it, but they know they have to. Bitcoiners don't have that. Bitcoiners are the opposite. They're like, you want my Bitcoin? Show me some value. You better better show me a grass-fed steak. You know.
It's really, there's this meme going around. What would you do if you get like 10 Bitcoin tomorrow? And I'm like, securing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Securing it. Just like keep it. Maybe move it into a very secure wallet, a nice setup and all of that. But like what else would I do with it? Maybe buy some dream thing if you have something like that. But what else would you buy for it? Like and it's also the question always. I love that. I think Pram also mentioned this a lot. If someone comes to you like, oh, will you diversify your Bitcoin at some point? Why don't you buy this and that? And I'm like, sell for what? Like what would I buy? Like I don't get it. So this is not really an option for me to like sell Bitcoin.
Yeah. What is better than Bitcoin once you've gone down the rabbit hole? You know, I actually just had that call with a client yesterday where they were thinking about like, oh, should I, diversify out of some of my Bitcoin? And then the whole conversation is like, well, what are you going to buy? So yeah, absolutely.
Really, really cool. Let's get to the end routine of the podcast, where the previous guest, as you know from might know from the last time, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question: has there been something in this bear market that made you question your bullish thesis on Bitcoin?
No, there's been nothing. It feels like the same. Feels the same with different FUD. And before it was like during the FTX FUD? It was like these exchanges are like fraudulent and like you can't trust the crypto industry. It was kind of like that. And this one feels like quantum is going to get it, or it's going to be controlled by the institutions. Or the institutions are manipulating the price. It just feels like the same feeling all over again with new FUD. When I first got in, it was governments are going to stop it. That was the big one. Governments just won't allow it. That was like, they just are not going to allow it. And you read about the architecture, you're like, I don't understand how they're going to shut it down. Once you understand how the architecture works, they're going to go around and find all these tens of thousands of nodes all around the world and like with a sledgehammer smash them at the exact same time or something. How are they going to stop it? So it just feels like this is this round of FUD. When the price comes down and there's the FUD circulating, it feels uneasy. Been there, done that, tick-tock, next block kind of thing, So no, there hasn't been. Now, do I get to leave a question?
100%. I want to rephrase the question. I'm curious. I just had that in my mind. Is there something, or like, what is the most annoying thing for you about this bear market? Is there something that like stands out and might be different from like previous cycles that you have been in?
Yeah, I'm personally getting a lot of the CIA and Epstein created Bitcoin. Did you know? And I'm just like, oh, so yeah, that's annoying. That's like super annoying. Super annoying. Yeah. So yeah. Yes, that's annoying. I'm getting that one. I don't know if you're getting that one, Robin. I'm getting that one. Did you hear? I'm like, oh gosh,
Did you hear Epstein made Bitcoin? And I'm like, wait, what?
Really? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
I guess I have to sell now.
Yeah.
You get to leave a question for the next guest. I usually do it offline, but you can give it to me also right now if you want.
Okay, yeah, I'll give it to you right now. It's how are nation states going to tax Bitcoin 10 years from now? 10 years from now, what are they doing? What are nation states doing to tax Bitcoin 10 years from now?
That's how are nation states gonna
tax Bitcoin 10 years from now?
10 years. That is
Maybe
a brilliant
maybe
question.
the answer nation states exist differently, or there's I don't know. Yeah, let's see. Let's
And
see what they
it's
say.
really interesting to think about the impact that Bitcoin will have. I think we touched on it in the beginning of the episode. Like, you cannot just tax it. It's
Difficult.
There's this thing where you can only get Bitcoin if the guy that has Bitcoin gives it to you. You can like hit him, you can kill him, you can shoot at him, you can shout at him, whatever you want to do. But if he chooses to keep his Bitcoin, there's no way of getting it. Like with real estate, you can get it. With gold, you can just like grab
Totally.
it. Like all other things you can just get. And Bitcoin rewards the voluntarily giving part. Like you incentivize
Absolutely.
someone else to do. You incentivize other people to provide great services to you, for you to voluntarily give it to you and not by force.
And then won't nation states then be forced to offer service and value to the people? Like the opposite of what it feels like it's been happening to all of us? Like, this is, to me, my like great hope and dream. Like, oh my gosh, Bitcoin's going to force governments to offer value because of what you just said. Yes. Yeah. That's exciting. That's exciting. Yeah. I know it's wild. Somebody listening to this is going to think these guys are crazy, but that's exciting. Yeah. Yeah.
I think this all the time. I'm like, there has to be people watching that and thinking they are really stupid. Both of, like, how can they even think that?
Totally. Yes. I'm willing to accept it.
The podcast has around like 50 to 100,000 people watching every month. And it's like, there has to be people that just sit there and like, what are they talking? Like, that doesn't make no sense what they're talking whatsoever.
Who is this guy, Robin? But they keep listening to you, so that's good. They're still trying to figure you out, Robin.
This is actually interesting. I don't know. I'm really fascinated with content creation. I think we are already over time, so sorry if I keep you. I just bring that one point in there. I'm fascinated. There's always like a negative account coming up that brings like negative comments against Bitcoin. And I see him on my channel, on other channels. I even was yesterday on a live stream, he was in there. And like, I really know now his name and like his profile picture, because he's just so persistent. And he has been into like 10 or 20 videos already of my channel. And I'm like, either it's a bot, and like then it could be totally fair. But it's not written. Like, if it's a bot, it's a really good bot. Like it's really human written. So like it's an advanced AI bot if it's a bot. And other than that, like, is there actually someone that like bought Bitcoin at like 126 and sold like 2 weeks ago and now is angry at all the Bitcoiners
Totally.
and like going on those channels and like hating on you? Like, it's just like really interesting how haters are watching content. And they did a study what is the impact of haters of famous people, and they saw that the haters of the famous people actually accelerate their growth further than the most loyal fans, because the haters are the ones that constantly talk about them, they constantly share it to other people.
They're best promoters.
Like, like, you see what Ronaldo said, like he cannot even score that goal. Like the haters are usually like the more viral spreader of things. That's just a blurb of content creation that I wanted to get rid of.
Never really thought about it that way, but makes sense. Yeah, totally makes sense.
But yeah, thank you so much, Tom, for being on the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask your questions, and reach out to you?
I guess website rockstarinnercircle.com, and I'm on X, Tom, which is my name, Tom Karadza. Yeah, always a pleasure to chat, Robin. Always a pleasure to chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom, for being on and taking time. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.